the first plenary speech by Dr. Francesca Bianchi. Audience members and participants are invited to ask questions after the plenary speech or ask them during the speech in the Zoom chat box. Francesca Bianchi is an associate professor of English language, linguistics, and translation at the University of Salento. Let's welcome her with her presentation, Terminology Resources for Translators and Interpreters, Online Resources, Corpora, or Machine Translation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for being here, and thank you in particular, thanks to the organizing committee for inviting me to this conference. It's an honor really for me to be here and opening the conference with my presentation, a presentation which is not aimed to provide answers, probably, but rather to raise questions and debate about how we use resources which are available online versus corpora and machine translation when it comes to terminology. Okay, let me now try and share my screen with you. I'm not familiar with the Zoom thing, but I'll do my best. So when I started my working career after university, and that was over 25 years ago, I started it off as a translator. And at the time, we only had paper dictionaries to resort to. The internet was still in its infancy. But things have changed a lot. Nowadays, we've got the web too, which offers translators a huge range of lexical and textual resources. And we use them constantly, but do we use them out of habit? Do we use them consciously? Are we really aware of their potential and limits? Do we use them profitably in the best possible way? Having these broad, vague questions in mind, I set off with an experiment at the end of last year, which I carried out with a colleague, an engineer, Marco Zappatore. And I will now report the results of that experiment to you, plus a recent extension with other resources. These results are partially published already. They were published earlier this year. The aim of our experiment was to assess the effectiveness of online resources with a focus on word meaning in particular. And the online resources we wanted to analyze included Wikipedia, as an example of an encyclopedia, major dictionaries, English dictionaries available online and which we accessed through the One Look portal, bilingual English-Italian dictionaries, again available online, corpora, accessed and created using the sketch engine, which many of you are probably familiar with. And in particular, we worked with the BNC and the 1010 corpora, which are general corpora aimed for general study of the English language, and user-created corpus, specifically created for this project. And for machine translation engines, and finally, the Linguistic and reversal context websites. Interestingly, nearly all of these resources, in some way, take advantage of corpora, because dictionaries nowadays are largely based on electronic corpora. Machine translation engines resort to artificial neural networks, which are trained on large parallel corpora, and the Linguistic and reversal context websites are bilingual parallel corpora. We started with a rather naive hypothesis based on personal experience and our students' experience. And we expected Corpora to be the best lexical resource, dictionaries to provide some use, but less entries, useful entries than Corpora. Machine translation engines, we expected them to provide inaccurate solutions, but also to quick improve over a short time. And Lingue and Verso were expected to be possibly useful, given that they are Corpora, after all, in a bilingual form. For our experiment, we worked on the Italian-English language pair, translating from English into Italian, and we selected word jab in its medical meaning and within the COVID pandemic context. Why jab in particular? First of all, because of its polysemic nature. Jab is used in the area of sports, boxing in particular, but also in general language, both technically and figuratively, concretely and figuratively, and within the area of medicine. It appears, it can be used as a noun, a verb, and an adjective. Jab is not a new word, not even in the medical area, as it has been around for several decades, as Webb 2021 observed. It is mentioned in the Oxford English Dictionary, and its first appearance in some vocabulary of medicine or connected to medicine dates back to early 1900s. And finally, word jab has been extremely frequent in English media in the last 24 months due to the COVID pandemic. How did we analyze these resources? Wikipedia and the other dictionaries were analyzed using the Wayback Machine, which is a digital archive of cached web pages, which allows you to see the changes that every web page has undergone over time. Corpora were analyzed using the Sketch engine, and in particular, the job corpus was created automatically using from the web, automatic downloading paging from the web. And as seeds, a limited set of seeds were used. The word jab in its noun forms, jab and jabs, in its verb forms as jabbed and jabbing, plus a few context words such as COVID, pandemic, and booster. In order to assess the quality of machine translation engines, 5 texts from English newspapers were selected, and they were selected because they contained different meanings of word jab and different collocations and grammar forms. And the texts were fed to each of the 4 machine translation engines 5 times from September 2021 to August 2022. And the results were analyzed in terms of quantity and quality of their lexical meanings in the translation of word jab. What were the results of this experiment? Okay, Wikipedia has as its main entry for job an entry dealing with sports, a type of punch used in the martial arts, but in its disambiguation page, it also offers, refers you to the word, to the page injection. In the injection page, jab appears as a synonym to injection, belonging to the English rather than American or Scottish language. But Wayback Machine tells us that this piece of text was entered only in 2010, although the injection page itself is much older. Further browsing Wikipedia, we found that the word jab appears in the influenza vaccine page, where flu jabs and flu shots are synonyms of influenza vaccines, but again, these synonyms were added only in 2017. Monolingual dictionaries. All our 6 monolingual dictionaries include an entry for noun jab in the meaning of injection, and they all specify it is an informal usage. But again, the Wayback Machine tells us that this entry was added pretty recently. In the Merriam-Webster, for example, it was added only in June 2021. Two dictionaries out of 6, the Oxford English Dictionary and the Collins Co-Build, also include noun jab in its meaning of vaccination, while jab as a verb is listed only in 3 dictionaries out of 6. And in all these cases, the entries are very recent. All appeared after August 2021. In bilingual dictionaries, noun jab appears in all of them, some in some way connected to the medical field. Sansoni reports 3 different translations corresponding to 2 meanings, injection and vaccination. Cambridge Bilingual provides 2 translations, one for injection and one for vaccination. The Collins English Italian and the Larousse, only 1 term, while Word Reference, only 1 term corresponding to vaccination. None of them consider jab as a verb. What happened with Corpora? The BNC is a huge general corpus created with texts belonging to the 1990s. And it included noun and adjective jab, typically as a noun, pre-modified by names of illnesses, tetanus, encephalitis, typhoid. There were quite a few of them, but only included 1 hit of jab as a verb in its semi-technical meaning of to inject. Similar results were obtained with the 3 1010 corpora. The 1010 corpora are corpora automatically created from the web, and they are huge, very many million words. Also in this case, we got a few times jab as a noun modified by names of illnesses, different illnesses from the one found in the BNC, but depending on the different time spans covered by the various corpora, and only 1 hit as a verb with a general meaning this time to appears. Our jab corpus, which was created in about 5 minutes and with no effort at all, retrieved over 2,000 hits of jab as a noun and over 500 hits of jab as a verb, illustrating various meanings, all pertaining to the medical area. Those of vaccine, vaccination, and to vaccinate. Lingue. Lingue was analysed, entering jab as an adjective, as a noun, jabs in its plural form, and jabbed to represent the verb form. It only retrieved 17 examples, of which 3 referred to the medical field and illustrated 2 possible meanings, vaccine and vaccination. But the number of examples was limited. I could not expand it further. I tried to circumscribe the search to the medical field, but it proved impossible. Whenever I added other words, the word jab sort of disappeared from the list of hits retrieved. Interestingly, Linguae offers a definition from Wikipedia, but it gets it from the wrong page about sports. The best thing that Linguae proved to be is that they offer automatic translation with DeepL, and we will see that DeepL was one of the best, if not the best, machine translation engine in this particular case. Reverso retrieved 80 hits, only 6 of which were referred to the medical field, but they illustrated 3 meanings: injection, vaccination, and vaccinate. Circumscribing the search to the medical field was sometimes possible, sometimes not, depending on the kind of extra word I used. If I entered vaccine, then 6 examples were returned, all relevant. Entering words such as Pfizer or COVID added nothing to the initial search. It also offered some translations of jab into Italian, but all of them referred to jab as a noun and none as a verb. Interestingly, Reverso also offers automated translation through an in-house machine translation engine, which they claim to be the world's most advanced translator for over 15 languages. Unfortunately, when I entered the texts into this engine, jab was translated correctly only 1 time out of 15, a result which is much worse than the worst machine translation engine we analysed, Sistran. And indeed, these are the results of machine translation engines. The blue line illustrates Sistran. Sistran started off with very few correct translations of jab, improved slightly in October, but then its output got worse and worse. And in December and August, 0 hits of jab were translated correctly. Slightly better than that was Google Translate, which translated correctly 5 terms out of 15 initially, and improved in October and November, but then leveled off to 6 correct terms out of 15. Bing showed similar results to Google. There was not much difference, even in terms of the actual translations, and it kept stable through the whole time. The best machine translation engine proved to be DeepL, which improved twice in October and again in August 2022, reaching as many as 11 correct translations out of 15. Machine translation engines have long been studied both in the IT area and within the area of translation. Their quality, output quality, has been assessed with various methods, a range of domains, and in several language pairs, and considering a lot of parameters, to the point that their results are a bit difficult to compare, because the different language pairs and the different parameters and the different methods used eventually lead to having inconsistent and even contradictory results. But it seems that some machine translation engines have been improving a lot over time in the last few years, especially for some specific language pairs. Aikinen found that Google Translate had had an improvement of 34% over 8 years in 2019, but this was specific to some language pairs in particular. The Intento Corporation in 2020 claimed that some tools, such as Google Translate, have greatly improved the quality of translation into and from English, especially when the text is technical and words are provided in context. That is, when full texts are fed into the system rather than single words. We did some experiments within the Italian English language pair, and according to at least one of our experiments, which I will now refer, is it seems that the greatest improvements have been achieved at the level of syntax and not at the level of lexicon. These are the results of an ongoing master's thesis. As you see, we considered several grammatical categories and also lexical categories and technical categories, but the majority of mistakes in both DeepL and Google Translate, and again, Google Translate fared much worse than DeepL, belong to the lexical area. And in particular, those systems provide an incorrect translation of words, terms, and multi-term units. So these small-scale tests suggest that a specialized corpus is indeed, as we expected, the best lexical resource. Dictionaries, be they monolingual or bilingual, offer a rather limited range of specialized meanings in this case, mostly connected to the noun form and no verbs, and they were all very recent additions. Machine translation engines fared even worse to some extent than expected. They ranged from disastrous, Syscam, to only partially accurate, DeepL. They showed less improvement than expected, and they proved to be weak, in particular at the lexical level. Linguistic was less useful than expected, while Reversal proved better than Linguistic, but had a dreadful machine translation tool. But do translators use these resources, and how and why? According to a research by Gallego Hernandez, carried out in Spain, mostly with Spanish translators, over 85% of translators use primarily bilingual dictionaries and Google, or other forms of bilingual lexical resources, such as term databases and internet glossaries, or their own translation memories. Only 18% of them use Corpora, and mostly multilingual Corpora. 10% of these translators use machine translation to support them when doing lexical research. So I would say that these data raise a lot of questions. And the first one that comes to my mind is, if specialized corpora are so easy to create and so powerful, and dictionaries are largely based on corpora, why do online dictionaries still offer a limited range of meanings? for technical terms, even when they are used as jab in everyday language nowadays. They have entered newspapers. Of course, there could be very many replies to this, maybe because dictionaries are still compiled mostly by people. So they need dedicated people to improve the dictionaries, to change, to update them. Time cost reasons, marketing reasons, perhaps paper versions. They invest more in paper versions rather than free online versions. So there is a lack of interest from the publisher. Many more other questions, replies, ideas there. Another question that comes to my mind is, why do translators still resort to dictionaries if dictionaries are not that good after all? And when corpora are more powerful and easy to create and use than they were before, and they're certainly easy to create and use nowadays. Possible answers: they resort to dictionaries out of habit because they have been trained to use dictionaries and nothing else, because they don't know that alternatives exist. Well, again here, Gallego Hernandez's paper suggests a few possibilities. Some translators said that they had never heard of corpora. Some said they had heard of corpora, but building them is time-consuming. Others said that the corpora I would use are not free of charges, and I don't want to pay and spend money for resources. Others, and that's still an interesting point, tend to confuse corpora with other types of archives, which means that their answers are not really to the point. Other questions again came to my mind. Is it still worth creating dictionaries and teaching students how to use dictionaries when we could focus on other resources? I would think it is, yes, definitely, but we need to provide them greater awareness of the limits and possibilities of dictionaries, and also provide them with knowledge of other resources and methods. And this would be perhaps connected to another question yet. Is there anything that we could do or could be done generally to help dictionaries improve? Maybe greater collaboration between online dictionary providers and translators and researchers. Maybe collaboration between dictionary providers, online dictionary providers and universities. Or maybe new IT methods are necessary there. I'm not such a great expert in IT methods. I leave it to our colleagues. Of course, the questions and answers I'm providing are only partial, and there could be many more. Another question is, I'm a corpus linguist myself. In particular, I have, from being a translator, I've gradually moved to being a devoted corpus linguist in particular. I still ask myself, how can we support the use of specialized corpora by translators? Do we use it enough? Do we teach it enough in our university curriculum? Maybe greater attention could be paid there. But also, we should probably try and promote the importance of corpora, monolingual corpora, more than bilingual ones, in all possible venues. Translation companies, translation training outside university, even the EU. The EU takes advantage of other methods rather than corpora. They do create parallel corpora, but they don't take advantage of them from the start. And of course, tools such as the sketch engine for creating and analyzing corpora should be offered freely. That would certainly help. And maybe there could be other ways. And then it comes the machine translation problem, friend or foe for translators. Well, so far, I would say that they seem to be faring worse and improving more slowly than generally advertised. Which means that as long as machine translation makes mistakes, the translator's job is safe. But we should find ways to get more involved, I believe, in their development. And eventually we will have to find a way to consider them friends rather than foes. But this is still an area, of course, where a lot of more research is needed from all sides. And I believe that getting involved in their creation could serve as help. Finding new niches within the machine translation field. Things are changing, we need to change along with them. Thank you. I hope the presentation, I hope you may help me add questions to the ones I have listed and maybe add answers as well.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Professor Francesca Bianchi, very much for your presentation. And indeed, you highlighted very many issues that our students and also professionals face. I liked in particular when you said that there are more questions than answers, and those who work in that field definitely have an ongoing series of questions, and I had kind of three thoughts and opinions about what you highlighted. For example, in the language pair English-Latvian, very often we face terminological lacunae, and then probably I was also, again, we don't have to answer this question right now, but I was rhetorically thinking, what do we do about all those available sources which will probably indicate the term in the source language, but not in the target language? Secondly, when recently I tried to work with a text which was full of lacunae by using deep L, when the text was translated online, I received a message that stated, so because of the peculiarity of the text, we the text is going to be analyzed by 5 independent translators, and we are kind of going to use that input data for further texts which might have similar language and terminology. So I was just thinking again how reliable my input might be in that case. And yes, I agree also very much about specialized corpora. And here I was thinking that what we actually need, particularly in such language pairs as English-Latvian, urgently is not only monolingual specialized corpora, but also the reference corpora, where certainly the data for comparison can actually then be used further in translating highly specialized texts. So these would be my comments as I was listening to you, but thank you very much. So these issues raise a lot of questions.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, indeed, different languages have got different issues and standing nowadays with regard to corpora, and you're totally right in saying that we need also wide general corpora as reference corpora. Although it is true, it's also true that when you work with specialized language, if your target is understanding meaning and finding perhaps translations of specialized terms. You could also do by comparing two specialized corpora from different domains, because keywords would emerge anyway, and they would refer, probably 90%, I'm sure, they will bring out technical terms belonging to each domain. Systems such as the sketch engine is very, very convenient in the sense that by entering a few seeds, it browses the web and it extracts all pages containing those words, which means you can compile your own corpus really in a very, very few minutes. But of course, a lot will depend on how big the web is. Furthermore, for that particular language. But it also offers another option, that is to quickly upload texts that you've got in your own computer. It could be scientific papers or technical papers on a given topic. And I'm particularly in favor of monolingual corpora rather than parallel corpora, because parallel corpora include original texts and translations. And so eventually we are falling into our own steps. As translators, we provide translations and we use our own translations, while the language moves on, the language changes constantly. And I really think that resorting to original source texts in the two languages would be more fruitful. Okay, this is just
thank you.
Extra ideas to work on for all of us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your lecture. With millions of questions. Because I'm working with German, so I can endorse your statements. I think you told us very much about the users, but as from the perspective of a dictionary author, as me, for example, I have the same questions exactly. But meanwhile, I have done some research in this direction. And my conclusion from the last impressions from this result is that the optimal way is a connection to connect a dictionary with a corpus. For example, to connect a general dictionary, a monolingual dictionary, like the Wörterbuch der deutschen Gegenwartssprache, with a corpus. So you, on one screen, you can visit both the corpus and the dictionary, and you can use analytical tools, collocation analysis, statistics, together with other dictionaries, for example, etymology. It's clear it's far more better for the general language. But for the language of special purposes, it's a very hard way. I will illustrate it in my lecture on the example of the German-Czech chemical terminology. So I only had one practical question. If you are, my presentation is in English, but I will speak in German. So wouldn't it better for you to speak in English than in German?
Okay, thank you for asking. I'm afraid I can't understand German. But if you want to, and I would be really, really interested in listening to your presentation. But if the slides are in English, would that be enough
so
for me?
Every now and then we can jump into the English, and if you don't understand something, you ask me. I would very appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your lecture. Highly interesting for me.
Thank you. I like your idea of linking corpora to dictionaries. It has not been done yet, and it's a good idea. They will have to find a way. I'm just thinking that the easiest way to connect a dictionary to corpus is by showing collocations, concordance lines. But concordance lines are not easy to read for someone who's not a linguist. And translators are not necessarily linguists in the sense that they are not necessarily used to analyzing sets of data. So maybe extra features will be needed also, quicker and dirtier features, such as those offered in the sketch engine. I keep on talking about the sketch engine, not because I have an interest in that particular software, which I have none, but because it definitely is the only one for the time being that has been specifically created for lexicology, and it does offer some features that the others don't offer, such as word sketches and multi-word unit extraction. It's a very, very interesting idea. Definitely needs further.
I would ask another question here, if possible. Do you think about the possibility of cooperation between experts and linguists via translation theory, translation tools, and etc.?
Well, they are not collaborating now, probably, but there's always a way, and I believe collaboration is always the solution to anything, everything, because having all possible perspectives is definitely necessary. Still, we don't collaborate enough at various levels.
Good. I will touch this question also in my lecture.
I'm looking forward to it.
Compatible.
Excellent. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.